Next up, we have Katie Lair, who advises on our health programs, and Joe Wist for our manufacturing program. And they're going to talk a little bit about MACRAO, how they utilize it, and also general education.
We have no bombs to throw. I don't think like the last session. I know both of our goals is just to have, I think where we gain the most is we just talk about experiences that we have in advising and how we get people out of problems, in essence. And Tracy talked to both of us just about, Kay's going to just talk about MACRAO, the requirements, and then just have some things of, hey, where did somebody run into a problem with it? How did they get somebody else out of a problem? All of my knowledge, I was lucky. I worked with John Baxter. Those who work with John know John was the guru. We got people here who probably just started advising, and some of you are going, who is he even talking for? I've been here longer than him. I know this better than he does. Just want to kind of get a discussion about how MACRAO can benefit students, keep them out of trouble, and just a general understanding.
All right. Well, Dee Dee just told me MACRAO is going away September of next year, so this will be in effect for another year. So
we're not talking about that today.
But we're not talking about that today. So we're going to talk about MACRAO as it stands today, which the university's policy, a new policy went in place in fall of 2010, and so that's the policy I'm going to talk about. Does everyone know what MACRAO is?
Yes. And I don't think it's going away. I think
It's changing.
It's changing.
It's changing.
So everyone knows what MACRAO is? Yes, okay. So MACRAO and how it works with Ferris, and in your packet is the Ferris academic policy that we have in place for MACRAO as it currently stands effective fall of 2010. And what I have been finding, I use MACRAO a lot in our healthcare programs, and for our students, in healthcare, sometimes it can save them upwards of 10 credits of general education. And so that's why when we're talking about reducing student debt and all of those things, I love MACRAO for that option for students. But when I talk to my colleagues up on the main campus, they have a hard time understanding MACRAO and how it works for the program. And so I go through a lot of information with them. But according to the policy, as it states for MACRAO, is that MACRAO completes the general education communications competency, the lower divisions of that. It completes scientific understanding, cultural enrichment, social awareness, race, ethnicity, and gender, and global awareness requirements. Okay? Towards a bachelor's degree, I guess you could use them for an associate's degree if you have someone who has MACRAO. But what it doesn't complete is math, and it doesn't complete the upper division communication, so English 321, 325, 311. The other thing that it doesn't do is it doesn't complete what we call in College of Health Professions programmatic requirements. So if you have a program that has certain requirements, it doesn't meet that if they have MACRAO. So the best example I can give, because it's one land I live in every day, is for all of our healthcare programs in our management area, students have to have Biology 109, Basic Anatomy and Physiology. I have a lot of times where students transfer over with the MACRAO stamp, but that math or that science is not completed because Biology 109 is a requirement for our degree, and so it doesn't complete programmatic things. I know with business, there's certain social awareness courses that students have to have, economics. MACRAO wouldn't cover those because those are programmatic. We have a program, dental hygiene or sonography requires communications. So those are programmatic things. So you as a college need to figure out what are your programmatic requirements that whether or not a student has MACRAO, if they're going to complete it or not. Okay. But MACRAO is a great one. Joe and I were talking at the table. It's nice because even if it's just communications, completing that requirement saves them 3 credits. Or I like it as an advisor because I don't have to worry about how a course transfers to Ferris for cultural enrichment if it's a 200 level. That always confuses students. Well, I took Humanities 202 there. Well, it's only 102 here. So you don't have to worry about those kinds of things. So MACRAO is a nice policy. It is something that only community colleges can award. And every community college, if you look at their course requirements, every community college is different. GRCC, out of all the schools I work with, is the only school that counts public speaking as a humanities course. Okay? Not every community college does that. And so some community colleges call history a humanities. Others call it social awareness. So it is strictly community colleges award it. I think it's nice. As an advisor, I feel like it's nice to at least have a general idea of what classification students have so you know if you can direct them or not. But each college is a little different with that. So
When you were first getting your head wrapped around MACRAO, as an advisor, was it helpful for you to look at, okay, here's the, for example, GRCC MACRAO sheet, the reference sheet of what classes they need to take, and then compare that to your programmatic, so that when you're advising a student, you will look at that and say, of those 15 classes that you can take to get that MACRAO stamp to satisfy that, for this program, you really should probably take this course, because it's going to cover something.
And that's exactly what I do, is I have a pretty good idea, though I was telling Joe, GRCC just changed their MACRAO courses, and that's kind of thrown me off a little bit. But to have a general idea of what courses that are needed for my degree fit into a MACRAO, it's really helpful so that students aren't taking additional courses. If you have certain things, I'm going to keep picking on Don because I remember him talking and Peter talking about them needing economics. If you know that your programs need economics, those are social awareness, making sure that they build those into their MACRAO to help them out so they're not just taking psych because they really enjoy it and end up still having to take economics in the back end of things. So I have all the community colleges that I work with. I've printed off all their MACRAO stuff, and then I just kind of know, and then I just keep looking at it. It's also important to know with MACRAO, though, is that if they have MACRAO does meet social awareness and cultural enrichment, even if the grade is below a C- there. At the community college, it just kind of comes in and says it's met, but you have to make sure as an advisor that the student is still going to have over the credits needed for the degree, that they have the 120 or the 60 or whatever's needed for your degree. So you got to keep an eye on that. So even though we'll come in and say, with social awareness that requirement has been met with MACRAO, you still need to make sure they have enough credits overall.
And and as you all know, there's a huge confusion on, is that a global, is that a reg? It kind of takes all that off the table. I teach engineers, you figured they could read a sheet, figure out a table that says reg and this and that. And invariably, all the screw-ups on the check sheet are on the gen ed side.
Yeah.
Every time I got a degree audit issue, it's gen ed. So I drive. I didn't do this right away. John Baxter's going, why aren't you using this MACRAO more? I go, yeah, why aren't I? Because I came in and knew what MACRAO was, we weren't using it, finally dug into it. In my case, GRCC counts more math and science towards gen ed than Ferris does, and our guys take more math and science, end up saving typically 6 credits. And for me, what I generally do as a practice, and maybe you don't, I do the Ferris check sheet with bids being through Ferris criteria. I then send them to GRCC and say, have it analyzed for MACRAO.
Yep.
If they say 3 classes and I say 4, get
Go with them.
MACRAO. If it goes the other way, then you do my criteria. So, and
I do the same
invariably, they like you for it. The students are very pleased to hear their way to kind of cover that whole issue. Yeah.
I'm afraid to ask this question, but Roxanne, it's gone back and forth a couple of different times on English 2. It used to be, even if you had MACRAO, you needed a C or higher in English 2, and then it was if you have MACRAO, that requirement is satisfied to take.
For gen ed, it doesn't matter the grade, but again, it's a
Program.
It's a program requirement. And I think that's the thing that I would clarify in
Yep.
the way you present that, is that it isn't that there's any difference in gen ed. It's where programs have directed gen ed electives, and then there's a grade attached to it.
Right.
So, for instance,
Yeah.
ideally for gen ed, students have 3 electives of whatever fits the category. But to help them expedite the process, you directed them to do
Biology 109, yep.
science.
Yep.
And so if their program is saying that they want to see, with English, that they want to see 250 with a C,
I think the issue is that the 300.
321. Yes, I was just going to say that. Yes. Yeah.
now, my take on it has been.
If they had macro.
If they got macro, they've got the prereq.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Is that before 2010 now?
It's changed a couple of
Yeah.
times.
So
Yeah.
you are okay, if they have macro, you're okay with us waiving that C requirement?
I'm fine with that, okay.
Okay.
Good to know.
Somebody write that down.
It's on camera. It's on camera, Deb. So.
Joe, just a thought, something I wasn't a believer in macro until about 2 years ago, then I became a convert of macro. So I always advise macro, I got that great little sheet. I'll actually go around and circle the classes that these students should take that really are tuned to our degree. And as long as they take those classes, that's really good. Now, something that's really helpful for us is there's some 200 level GRCC classes that transfer in as 300 levels. That really add to their portfolio of 300, just in case there's some kind of mistake later on, which I have seen. So by actually specifying those classes, most students go, oh, I get it, sure.
And that's awesome,
End of
because
story.
we think about time,
Yep.
time to degree progression.
Yeah.
I mean, by doing that, you could have saved that student 6 credit,
Yeah.
2 classes of time.
But
and
don't just
money.
say, just here's the macro, because it's a confusing sheet.
Right.
I mean, look at your program, see what's really tuned for your program, and circle that for it, put them in their file, give them a copy, and say, here, take these classes.
Well,
Ju-
the same
just
with,
speak-
like, nursing.
yeah.
I mean, you need, if you are helping them, the best to help them is they need 6 credits of upper level outside of our program. So if they're gonna work towards macro, then yes, we should be helping them choose some of those
Just
at the
prescribe.
community college.
Yeah.
If you can do it, if you're in that position, just prescribe it, and that
And
way,
they
if
want
they go
that
out
a
of
lot
that
of times
side.
anyway.
Yeah, if they
Tell me
go
what to
outside their
take.
suggestions, that's their problem.
Just be careful if you did what I did and pulled off GRCC's macro, that it did change effective May of this year. So some of those courses that used to be in the boxes to meet humanities are not. So if you had copies, because I had them stashed, I just pulled them out. So it's not updated, and I did confirm with Patrick that that is the case. So if you are a GRCC advisor and that's what you did, just know that that's not effective anymore.
So it's not really a contract. If they don't actually declare a start, it's not.
It's
and
not
you
a
can change the
yeah.
macro, and they can.
Mhm.
And that was one of the discussions I was having, if you go to this new, whatever it is, instead of macro, if they actually would have met the macro criteria, and I sent them there 3 years ago, this, they get your macro, and now they come up with the new criteria, and it's different, and if you would have taken that, it isn't accepted in the new system, there goes another mess.
And the new system really is very similar to macro. The quantitative reasoning from math has been added in, and we're still debating on what that class is. But that's a big change from macro, because there's not a math class in macro right now.
That's required. Yeah.
And so that's important. The new program will also be more flexible for students. And so it's something that's being worked on. It's a legislative issue. It was mandated, this is what you will do, and make this change. And macro, while it's not a macro, it's not the macro any longer, macro is required or will be implementing the new Michigan Transfer Agreement. And we'll make sure that we provide information as that comes out as well.
Someone had a question, and I cut them off.
But I think one of the things was that when I'm the other thing I try to take into consideration as I'm helping them choose what they're gonna take for macro is what's gonna be available online if they're online students. Because, we have a few math 117s online, but generally it's hard to get that requirement online, and it's easier to get it at the community college. So I almost always pick out the math and say, take it.
And we used to send them, if they have failed math 1 or 2 times, I used to send them to on-campus 117 online because they only needed a D. But now that they can get that D at The community college.
Only if they're a consortium student.
That's right.
Only if they're a
That's right.
consortium
You
student.
can afford it. You have to pay 4 times as much to do it.
If they submit a consortium form, even if they're not receiving financial aid, my understanding is that they're still going to be treated as a consortium
Whoa, what?
student.
Whoa.
There's the out.
They could potentially submit a consortium form and be treated the same way, even if they're not receiving financial aid.
What's-
So I guess there's ways around it.
What?
Wow.
Everybody should.
So everybody.
That's fine.
Absolutely. Which is gonna make more work for me, but hey.
You should not debate on that.
Yeah, job security.
It never had a math.
Adam, see us.
The shifting sands of advising.
I know, it's always
That's
changing.
their policy.
Right.
All right. Any other questions? Yep.
Yeah, that whole area from college to school.
Okay.
Just the $8.
And maybe this is the English one?
The English one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you
okay.
ask it?
No.
It can either be math or science.
So
Yes.
if it's not getting a macro stamp, but they're at the community college, they failed English 1, but were successful in English 2. And they're not a financial aid, so we don't see the English 1 come over really. Do they have to go back and take English 1? Okay.
Is that a no?
That was a no, they do
No.
not.
That's the Mary Klein.
So if they got the higher level, they're
No,
good.
they do not, there is not a credit hour requirement on communication competence.
Oh.
It's a competency level. So if they, in fact, rarely, but once in a while, somebody will come in with a 300 and they don't have the lower division ones.
Awesome.
And so then that's fine.
I thought it said 12 credits.
It does.
But they don't have to have it, it's competency based, so if we do not, it would be ridiculous to make them go back and take the prerequisite that they already have.
We agree.
And they
Mary
do not
Klein
need to
always told me.
substitute, they're fine. They're fine with that.
And if a student, let's say a student is, already have a bachelor degree from Lawrence Tech, I've changed careers, I'm getting a second bachelor.
They've met Gen Ed.
They met Gen Ed. Yep.
Unless they're a programmatic.
Unless there's a programmatic. Yep. Yep. But then that's a program and not a gen ed. Yep. What about, Roxanne, here is one that's common. I had a student, and I know the answer. I know the answer to this question, but I just want to make sure. CLEP. There's no CLEP test that's equivalent to English 250, correct? Okay. No CLEP test equivalent. Because I know GRCC, they let them CLEP and they give them credit for English 101 and 102, but there's no
I just went
equivalency.
through that, so I said, go get your macro.
Yeah.
Now it's gonna count towards the 250 and make the English requirement anyway.
So. There are lots of other classes that you can CLEP out of, absolutely. So that's good. Business law, economics, sociology. So students that have that, and want to CLEP and find ways to get credit, that's a good way. Is certainly CLEP. Obviously everyone knows about AP. From high school that come in, so that's another way that they can do that. But as Casey was saying, we need to have the official scores. I think that's always the hard part on our end. Students, have English 101 or got English 101 credit from CLEP at GRCC, and we just never end up getting the transcripts from them. So, but they do have to be official coming from College Board or wherever they're getting their transcripts from. So, and they can do CLEP at our institution, or they can do it at GRCC or other community colleges if they're doing it, but the official scores can still be sent to Ferris.
But the AP doesn't get that credit.
AP, there are certain ones, if they took the AP test in high school, they need a score of 3, 4, or 5, but those official scores also need to come to Ferris as well. So if they started at Grand Valley and they sent those official scores there, Grand Valley's not going to send them directly to us. They need to contact the College Board and have them shipped directly to us to get credit.
They get waived from having to take the course, but they don't get credits.
They do get credit, right?
I'm not sure if the credit comes through or if it's just if they don't, if the course,
Course.
I have to look.
Course. It could
You
be.
still have to get credit for it. Credits, Gen Ed.
You could get though, I mean, you could get like a history, you could end up with 6 credits.
6 credits of history,
So
yeah.
the credits do.
Yeah, the credits do. They get credit, yeah.
The credits do, and so it
Yep.
could waive those courses as well as
Yep.
you get credit.
As a course, right. So if you scored a 3 in literature, you might get literature 150, which is 3 credits. So. All right. Other questions about Gen Ed or macro?
I'm glad I'm writing home.
All of the policies, the macro policy, the CLEP, the AP, those are all out online, and that's really how that's how I do a lot of stuff. If I don't know, I'm going out to the academic policy or finding someone who does know. But usually it's referring to the academic policies or going out there and finding those websites. And Ferris's website has really phenomenal information out there. It's just taking the time to find it. So.
And I just encourage everyone, talk to your other advisors.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been great. I'd sit around with Mike, we talk about how to deal with a problem student or whatever, and he gives me his perspective, I give him mine, and all these little subsets of problems, because every day you walk into it's a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
What kind of screwy things coming across the board for that day, and I think our best resource, we're all looking at it, let's just communicate together as best you can.
All right, well, Cruz, this, because I know that the last place before lunch is the worst time to present. So, let's see how quickly we can move through. The handout that you just received is a document that it summarizes what is going out from the time we have a prospective student inquire to the time that they are admitted. So the top line, I'll just kind of run through it quickly. Basically, when they inquire, they get an email. Then there is a letter and a little packet that goes out. And if you haven't seen it already, currently what we have, and this is changing in the near future, but currently what we have, there's a letter that goes out. We'll send a program plan for the program if we have it. And then we have our statewide view book, which varies a little bit per location, but there's general information about our off-campus programs and then little overviews of each program in the back. It's a comprehensive piece. We're in the development phase for a piece that is a little more costly to mail in the inquiry packet, but that's what goes out when somebody says, hey, I'm interested in Ferris. Then they will get, well, let me backtrack and say you've heard a little bit about Salesforce. That is our new, basically a database that is going to house and communicate with our prospective students and our current students. So we are in the implementation phase of that. It's not up and running. So where you see gray boxes, these are planned. They aren't here yet, but they're coming. So one of the things we're hoping for then is an email that goes out that introduces you guys as advisors, and that's again a reason we're taking photos today. But it's going to say, hey, here, I'm your advisor. Come make an appointment with me. I'd be happy to talk about what transfers and what you need to do next. There's a phone call that goes out from our regional locations. They just call and say, hey, we're happy that you're interested. Is there anything we can do to help? Have you set up an appointment with your advisor? And then there's a few programmatic things that happen. For example, the DAGD portfolio. And one of the hopes is an email that talks about, what can you do with this degree? Why is this so great? Why should you get the Ferris degree? And then again, another email. They're building kind of a database of help sites for inquiries and just kind of FAQs, that kind of thing. That again is in process. And then finally, one of the goals, and this is a little more long-term, but there are some out there currently. If you go to YouTube, some of you are aware if your program has one, but out on YouTube, there are some great videos that are TV and digital media production students have made that are programmatic, and they interview students, and they say why the programs are innovative and great. And so these videos will be emailed out to inquiries in a plan, and we'll develop more as we're able. So that's kind of a broad brush of inquiries. Again, the white is what is happening, which is minimal right now. But as we implement Salesforce, we'll have more opportunity and add the gray. So that's our inquiries. Any questions for inquiries? Yeah.
It's students that have not applied.
Thank you.
Not applied at all.
Correct. These are people who the only step they've taken is maybe we've encountered them at an event, or they called the office and said, hey, I want more information, but they have not filled out an application.
It's also students that might have met with an advisor, correct, that haven't applied. So that's where Appointments Plus is a really helpful thing that we are using because we're pulling that information. We collect a lot of information in Appointments Plus, and that helps for us to communicate to inquiries. So if that person hasn't applied yet and they're meeting with you, they're considered an inquiry. So as we get that information, so that's why we really push Appointments Plus, because that helps to direct the communication for those inquiries that hopefully then will become applicants.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to note too. We actually recently did a little study of ourselves and our competitors. One thing our competitors are not doing, they're not building relationships. They're not making phone calls, and they're not sending a lot of direct mail. There's a few emails that happen, but that's about where it stops. So our goal then is to focus on building a relationship. And with Salesforce, a lot of that can be automated. It's not necessarily going to take a lot more time. But what I encourage you to do is just kind of be aware, as you're out, I know a lot of you do recruiting events, or you'll visit classrooms, or you'll have a table somewhere. Make sure that we're capturing contact information, and I can get with you about how to do that. But if you're collecting that contact information, we can get them into this system, and a lot of automated communications then go out. And we're touching base. Frequency helps build relationships, and it's really important in capturing that potential student. So then when a student applies, they filled out the online application, they get an email. If they haven't actually submitted, I should backtrack. They need to make sure when they fill out the application that they click the submit button. They can start the information and then it will save it out there, but unless they click the submit application button, nothing else can happen. So there actually are 5 timed emails that go out if they have yet to click submit. So that's important. There's an email once they do that says, hey, thanks for applying, with some more information. There's also a phone call that happens at each of the regional locations that says, hey, thanks for applying. We're excited to have you as a student. And then there is another email that reminds them for especially programs that require their freshman entry, but all the programs require a lot of CC classes. It's reminding them that even though they applied to Ferris, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are admitted to the community college, and that is an additional step they need to take. Once a student clicks submit and they've applied, that doesn't necessarily mean their application packet is complete. There's often transcripts and things that we still need. So there are some communications that happen that remind them of those missing requirements. Again, these are gray. They're coming in the future. The application tracker was mentioned in Salesforce. That is going to allow students to go in and check, see what we've received and what we might still need. Currently, I will say that there is a letter that goes out that says what we have received. That is happening. That is going to go away when we have this new application tracker. It's a link, and there will be an email too, but it's a link that students can go and check. And so when that happens, there will be a postcard that goes out that explains how they can track their application. And again, an email with that as well. There's also going to be an email. Dawn talked earlier about late admits. Once we get late into a semester and their financial aid could be impacted as long as classes and all of that, there's an email that's going to go out that kind of explains that. This is the postcard that I mentioned. And then as we approach application deadlines and it's getting late, there's another email that goes out there. When it comes to the decision, once the decision is made, there's an email that goes out that says, hey, congratulations, you've been admitted as a student. There is also an application packet. You have a copy of the pad in your folder, but this is our application packet. And I have to say that this actually has won a merit award nationally, so we're pretty proud of it. But a new student gets this padfolio. There's a letter in it that says their student number, the details, their advisor. And this is why Cynthia has asked you to bring your business card today, because your business card goes in here, introducing you as the student's advisor. This is the pad that is in your packet today, but it's basically, it's like a mini student handbook. There's a lot of information in here. It's cptsmarketing.blogspot.com, and you do have to have access to it if you want it. Email me and we'll get you it. The reason is I didn't want to just put it out there on the internet so that our competitors could go out and see what we were doing. But as we develop things, we post it out here. And you can sort by locations, you can sort by programs, because they're tagged down here. Like for direct mail, click that, you're gonna see direct mail we've done recently. Online, here's what we've done for our online programs, that kind of thing. And then it sorts it by time and all that. But I want you to know that this resource is out there, it's available to you. We just need to get you access. If you're interested, let me know. Briefly, almost done, mentioned the flyers. Here's something else we have, besides our view book, is just kind of a general piece at most of our locations. If you're out and about, we have pennants that feature a relationship with our local community college, but then it's kind of a broad brush of what is available locally there. And I will stop there, because everybody's hungry.